Hey guys, Lindsay here. Welcome back to my channel. So I am definitely excited for this video. You guys know I was kind of really on the fence about getting the Urban Decay and Game of Thrones palette or any pieces from the collection, but I am a huge Game of Thrones fan. So in the end, that won over and I decided to order the palette and then of course the two brushes. I knew the brushes were going to be mine regardless because I mean, this is awesome. But the palette, I kind of caved and I bought it. And I'll say right up front, I'm actually really happy that I did because this palette is so much prettier in person. It's definitely one of those palettes that just doesn't translate quite as well on screen, on camera. I watched a bunch of people's videos, the ones that got it in PR beforehand, because I was trying to decide if I wanted it. And I was really on the fence. And then like when it finally dropped, I ended up talking myself into it. But I'm really happy that I did. So this is what the palette looks like up close. I've also done the swatches, so I'll put those on the screen so you guys can see that. I'm pretty sure you probably have already seen videos about this palette, so I won't go into super detail, but I will show you. So like you've got the Iron Throne all over the palette. I mean, this is an official HBO licensed product. The way that it works is just like the Alice in Wonderland one where it's like a drawer. And that's how your palette comes out and you can pull it completely out. So that's really cool. It's just a really cool collector's piece. That is the biggest part of this. It's a big collector's piece. You've got like the map detailing on here. You've got a lot of quotes. And then of course, big thing that you either hate this or you love this. I personally love it. I don't care if you think it's cheesy, but you've got a little pop-up Iron Throne. I love it. I also loved like the pop-up butterfly that they had in the Alice in Wonderland or Decay palette, so I'm a sucker for little details like that. So the other two pieces I picked up were obviously the brushes, just because you guys already know I love like fun brushes. I've got rose brushes, wand brushes, Ariel's fork brushes, so I was definitely going to get this no matter what. So let me show you the brushes. This one is Aria's brush. It's just a flat brush that I will be using for putting like shimmer on the lid, but this is Needle. So this is what the brush looks like as a whole, and then a little close up on the handle. And then we have John's Sword Long Claw. So it's just a really kind of fluffy packing brush. I used it to pack this color on the lid, but you can also use this to kind of maybe buff a little bit, but it's not very fluffy. It's got a good stiffness to it, so you'd be more like buffing out a color. But yeah, this is a close up of the handle. So I did give you guys a heads up letting you know that I picked up this collection, and I kind of asked if you wanted to just see a look or multiple looks or what, and I did have a number of people that say they wanted to see multiple looks. And of course, when I look at these shadows, I want to do multiple looks. So it was really hard for me to narrow it down to one or even just two looks. I really wanted to do like a full-on 4 because I wanted to kind of group it by the different locations, which is how they have it set up here. But I wasn't going to limit myself to only using those shadows. I still think, you know, it's okay to kind of intermix them a little bit, but I wanted to stay primarily within these little areas. So I decided to do 4 looks. But this is Easter weekend and it's been really hard for me to get to like film everything I needed to film. So this video will have 2 looks in it, and then I'll film the other 2 looks and I'll have that up on my regular Tuesday video. That will be the other 2 looks, and I'll go ahead and give like a full-on review of what I thought of all the shadows, because by that point I will have used most of the shadows in this palette, so I can kind of give you guys my final thoughts on what I think of all the shadows that I use. So I'm not going to go into any more detail about the shadows in this video. I'm just going to go into showing you guys the looks, and then like I said, you'll get 2 more on Tuesday along with like a kind of more in-depth review on the different shadows and the different formulas that I'm kind of finding in here and what I think of them. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover. So let's go ahead and jump into the first of 2 looks for this video. So the first look is going to focus on the King's Landing section. So I'm going to start out with House Lannister, and I'm going to put this all through the crease. I did prime my lids with the MAC paint pot and I didn't set it, so I'm putting this on the crease area and kind of blending it outward a little bit. Then I'm jumping straight into Lannister Red, and I'm using the Long Claw sword brush, and I'm just patting this all over the lid. This is actually a really beautiful color. I was surprised at like how opaque it was. I do feel like maybe the primer should have been a little bit more tacky to get a really even coat all over the lid. You can see there's a little bit of parts where it grabbed darker than others, and that's just has to do with the primer. So I definitely want to try this out again with a different primer, but I do really like the way this color went down. And then I'm just using the fluffy brush from earlier to buff more of Lannister Red into the crease and kind of out onto the outer portion a little bit so it's more blended. And I went ahead and jumped down to the lower lash line with a flat angled brush to line the lower lash line with Lannister Red. Then I'm going back into House Lannister and I'm using a fat pencil brush to really buff underneath the reddish shade on the lower lash line. And then I'm going to dip right back into Lannister Red with a smaller pencil brush to really buff that color out to make it nice and smoky. I'm just adding a little bit more on that outer portion to make it blend nicely with the lower lash line. And now jumping into Red Keep, I'm just using my finger and I'm patting this more on the center of the lid than anything, kind of like a halo eye without doing anything structured to it. And then I dipped into just a little bit of King's Landing again with my finger, and I'm just tapping this right in the very center of the color on my lid. It just adds a little bit of a brightness. Back into Lannister Red once more, just to kind of blend over the edges in the center so I don't lose that darkness. So I dipped back into Red Keep with my pencil brush and just very lightly put this on the inner corner. It's definitely not as bright as I would want it to be, but it gives that tone that I need. So I did jump into my Collective Cosmetics highlighter palette for the shade Emblazoned to add some brightness right over the top. And then for the waterline, I'm using this Maybelline pencil in the shade Striking Copper. And then I'm gonna finish off with some Milk Kush Mascara and House of Lashes Iconic Lights. And now for lips, I chose Queen's Blood from Wet n Wild. I did this specifically because I felt like it looked very similar to the Cersei lipstick that Urban Decay released. So this is the finished first look using the Urban Decay palette. I'm really happy with this one. I feel like it's a really gorgeous, wearable look. Definitely love the tones in this one. And now we'll move into the second look for this video, which is using mostly the Bay of Dragons section. So I'm starting out with House Lannister just because I wanted a light transition shade in the crease. So that's probably my one complaint with some of these areas is they don't always have a matte color to use. So I told you guys I was gonna mix around a little bit. Then to add a little bit more depth, I decided to jump into Weirwood Leaves, and I'm using this on a small fluffy brush, and I'm just very lightly running this through the crease. I'm just putting a little bit of color down, and then I'm just working on blending it into that kind of light peachy pink shade. And you can see that when you use this in kind of a lighter manner and you really blend it out, the fact that it has some shimmer to it doesn't really end up showing up. So I think this actually works really nicely in the crease. Then jumping into Stormborn, which is probably one of my favorites from the palette. I'm packing this all over the outer portion of the lid. It's such a gorgeous shimmery shade. It almost has a different feeling than the other ones. It's like a softer texture, but it's beautiful. And then I jumped into Dothraki, and I just kept using my finger just to place this on the inner part of the lid. I mean, it's just the fastest way to pack this color down. And then for a little pop, I jumped into King's Landing and just tapped a very small amount right up the center, right in between those two colors. Then I tried to use Bend the Knee as an inner corner highlight. I really wanted to use this shade, but I really prefer a brighter highlight, and this wasn't bright enough for me. I then tried to go over the top of it with Bay of Dragons, but again, this one just doesn't have much brightness to it. It's a pretty shade, but it's not very bright, not for what I would want in an inner corner highlight. So we'll get back to that later. For now, I'm taking Dothraki. I'm kind of touching up both colors with a wet brush. So first Dothraki, and then I'm going back into Stormborn with that same wet brush and just touching up, brightening the color up and kind of making it a little bit more precise around the crease area. And going back into that original deep purple shade Weirwood Leaves, I'm just kind of softly buffing through the crease again, just so that everything's nice and blended together. And I did switch to a kind of like a fluffier brush to pack a little bit more on the outer V area so that it looks nice and crisp. And then jumping to the lower lash line, I'm using a flat angled brush to put Weirwood Leaves all across the lower lash line. And then I decided to add a little bit of Dothraki right in the inner portion. And I'm topping that with King's Landing just to make it a little bit brighter. Back into Weirwood Leaves once more. I'm just very softly going underneath the gold shade and kind of smoking out that lower lash line a bit more. And then with a pencil brush into House Lannister, I'm really buffing across that lower lash line to kind of make it nice and soft. So I did go into one of my Collective Cosmetics highlighters. This is the Thawing, and I'm just tapping this over that inner corner. This really gives it the brightness that I personally want. Then I'm using No Shame from ColourPop. It's just a deep purple in the waterline. And then Milk Kush Mascara, and this time I'm using a pair of Likely lashes. These are Sleepy Starlet. Love these lashes. And then for lips, I'm using a little combo of Bittersweet from L'Oreal, and then I'm going to top it with Flames of Glory from the Wet n Wild Dragon collection. I actually kind of liked it before I put the topper on there, but I just kind of wanted to add a little bit of an iridescence to the lips. And this is the finished second look, so stay tuned for Tuesday where I will have 2 more looks plus a full review of the palette. Thanks for watching, guys.